I'm Ryan, 32 years old, software engineer, husband. The safe guy, the one who plans date nights, remembers anniversaries, loads the dishwasher the right way. I always thought being reliable was a good thing. Maybe I was wrong. This story starts on a Thursday evening, late October. That kind of chilly autumn night where the city feels alive, but you can't quite shake the cold. My company had organized a networking event at a new restaurant downtown. One of those places with exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, and a menu where the cocktails have names like Deconstructed Autumn and cost more than my lunch budget for a week. Kat was already there when I arrived. She texted me earlier, said she'd head straight from work. Usually that wouldn't mean anything. We worked in similar circles, had even been to a few of these corporate shindigs together. But something about the way she mentioned Jake this time, "Oh, Jake will be there, too," had rubbed me the wrong way. Can't explain why. Just a feeling. When I walked in, I spotted them immediately. Kat and Jake. Talking. Laughing. Closer than colleagues should be. You know how they say body language never lies? Hers was screaming. She was facing him, shoulders open, hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. The kind of casual touch that says, "I'm comfortable with you." Maybe too comfortable. His body language was saying plenty, too. Leaning in, smirking, holding eye contact just a second longer than necessary. If you didn't know them, you'd assume they were dating. And maybe, in some parallel universe where I didn't exist, they were. I stood there for a moment, unnoticed, watching, processing. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't even sure what I was looking at. But my gut knew. When Kat finally noticed me, her reaction was subtle, but telling. That half-second freeze like a computer buffering, before she flashed me a smile. Not the smile I used to get. This one was different, polished, distant. "Hey, babe," she said, breezy as ever, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. It was automatic, mechanical, like clocking in at work. Jake turned and greeted me, all casual friendliness. We shook hands. He was good at pretending nothing was out of the ordinary. Too good. I played along. What else was I supposed to do? Accuse her in front of her coworkers? Make a scene? That's not me. I'm the reliable one, remember? As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling. I watched Kat from across the table. The way she leaned in when Jake spoke, the sparkle in her eyes. It wasn't like she was ignoring me. She still laughed at my jokes, still reached for my hand once or twice. But there was a difference, a subtle shift, like I was no longer the center of her orbit. At one point, Jake mentioned a project they were working on, something high-stress, high-visibility. Kat nodded along, explaining how late nights had become the norm, how tight the deadlines were. She even joked about living at the office lately. That stung more than it should have. I mean, it's not like I hadn't noticed. The late work nights, the sudden weekend meetings, the new perfume, floral, sweet, not her usual scent. The way her phone was always face down when we had dinner. I chalked it up to stress, deadlines, normal life stuff. But sitting there, watching her glow under Jake's attention, the dots started to connect. I excused myself, heading to the bar under the pretense of grabbing another drink. Really, I just needed a minute, a breather, to process. What was I supposed to do with this feeling? It wasn't like I had evidence. No texts, no confessions. Just a gut instinct and a growing list of coincidences that didn't feel so coincidental anymore. When I got back to the table, Kat was mid-story. Something funny Jake had said at the office. She was animated, gesturing with her hands, laughing that laugh, the one that used to be mine. When our eyes met, she must have seen something in my face. A flicker of guilt, maybe? Or maybe I imagined it. Either way, her expression softened. She reached for my hand, squeezed it. "Don't look so serious, Ree. You're always overthinking. Relax. It's just work stress. You know how it is." I smiled, nodded, played the part. But something inside me stirred. It wasn't anger. Not yet. More like unease. Like watching cracks form in a wall you thought was solid. On the way home, she was chatty. Asked about my week. told me about a new project she might be leading. She even suggested we plan a weekend trip. Just the two of us to unwind. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was trying to throw me off the scent. And maybe she was. When we got home, she was affectionate. Kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong. But when she slipped into bed, her phone stayed on her side of the nightstand, face down. That was new. I lay awake longer than usual that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in my head, trying to convince myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid. But here's the thing about instincts, they don't care about logic. They gnaw at you. Whisper doubts when you least expect it. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But belief doesn't erase suspicion. And tonight, suspicion had taken root. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything started to change. After that night at the restaurant, life didn't fall apart overnight. In fact, if anything, it carried on exactly as it always had. That's what made it worse. There wasn't a smoking G*N. No dramatic confessions or late-night phone calls to another man. Just small things. Insignificant on their own. But together, they built a case my heart didn't want to believe. Kat's late nights became more frequent. She blamed the usual suspects, deadlines, client meetings, putting out fires. And for a while, I accepted it. Or pretended to. But the cracks were showing. One Saturday, we had plans to grab brunch at our favorite spot. Simple tradition. But that morning, she breezed into the kitchen, already dressed in business casual. "I'm so sorry, Ree, something came up at work. Jake needs my help with a presentation for Monday." I nodded, smiled even. But it stung. "You know you don't have to jump every time he calls, right?" I said it half joking, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. She gave me a look half amused, half annoyed. "It's not like that. We're a team. This is important. Team. Right?" She left after a quick kiss, her new perfume lingering in the air. Sweet, floral, unfamiliar. I'd asked about it once before, and she'd laughed it off. "A sample from a coworker," she'd said. Funny how those samples became her daily choice. That afternoon, I found myself wandering through the house aimlessly. Every room felt quieter. Emptier. I caught sight of a photo on the mantel, the two of us at a lake cabin, arms wrapped around each other, faces flushed with laughter. That was only 2 years ago. It felt like a lifetime. It wasn't just the late nights. Kat had grown distant in other ways, too. Little things. The way she avoided sitting too close on the couch. How she'd pull away first from a hug. The way her phone was now always face down, always on silent. Once or twice, I caught her tilting the screen away when I walked by. I told myself it was work emails. Maybe it was. But maybe it wasn't. There's a kind of paranoia that seeps into your bones slowly. It doesn't arrive like a tidal wave. It's a leaky faucet, drip by drip, until one day you realize you're drowning. One evening, she was getting ready for another work dinner. The care she put into her appearance wasn't lost on me. She tried on 3 different dresses. Curled her hair just right. Chose a pair of earrings I bought her on our honeymoon. I stood in the doorway watching her reflection as she applied her lipstick. "You're really going all out for this dinner, huh?" She paused just for a moment. "First impressions matter, potential clients will be there." It sounded rehearsed. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But that crack in the wall was widening. The thing about suspicion is it's isolating. You start to doubt yourself. Was I being jealous? Controlling? Had I become that insecure husband who can't handle his wife being successful and social? But no, that wasn't it. I trusted Kat. I had always trusted her. This wasn't about insecurity. This was about intuition. And mine was screaming. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. What would I even say? "Hey, I don't have any proof, but I think you're cheating because you're wearing more perfume and laughing too much with Jake?" No, I wasn't going to be that guy. So I waited. Observed. Another weekend came. Another excuse to be away. This time it was a team-building event. Odd, considering most companies don't hold those on Sunday afternoons. She left with a smile, promising she'd be back by dinner. She wasn't. When she returned, her hair was slightly damp, as if she'd rushed a shower. Her blouse was different from the one she'd left in. When I asked how it went, she waved it off casually. "Boring. You didn't miss much." That's when I knew she was lying. Kat has never been able to downplay a fun event. If it were a good time, she'd be telling me about who said what, laughing at inside jokes I didn't understand. But this time she was evasive. Distant. That night, she fell asleep quickly. Or pretended to. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight in my chest. That quiet, suffocating dread. Was this how it started for everyone? The slow unraveling of trust? The unanswered questions stacking up until they formed a wall between two people? I remembered when she used to share everything with me. Late-night talks about her dreams, her fears, even petty office drama. Now, the silence was louder than any fight we'd ever had. There's a loneliness in sharing a bed with someone who feels miles away. I started noticing patterns. The frequency of her meetings with Jake. The way her mood would lift when his name came up. How her work stories became less about projects and more about we, as if she and Jake were a unit. A partnership I wasn't part of. One evening, I picked her up from the office unexpectedly. She hadn't asked for a ride, but I happened to be nearby after a client meeting. When I texted her, she took longer than usual to respond. "Sure, that'd be nice," she finally replied. When she came down, she looked startled to see me parked out front. Not upset. Just surprised. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I'd interrupted something. Jake was with her. Of course he was. They were walking close. Talking quietly. When they noticed me, Kat's smile flickered just for a moment before she put on her usual cheery face. "Hey, perfect timing," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. Jake gave me a polite nod, his eyes unreadable. On the drive home, Kat was more talkative than usual. Filling the silence with stories about work, upcoming deadlines, the usual. It felt forced. I listened. I nodded. But my mind was elsewhere. How do you ask your wife if she's falling out of love with you? That night, I stood by our bedroom window, staring out at the quiet street. The reflection in the glass didn't feel like me. I looked older. Tired. Like someone carrying a weight he couldn't name out loud. The problem with suspicion is it doesn't give you closure. It gives you anxiety. Restlessness. You want answers, but you're terrified of what they might be. I started going through the motions. Smiling at her jokes. Holding her hand. Pretending we were fine. But deep down I knew. The woman lying next to me each night was slipping away. And I had no idea how to stop it. There's a moment in every betrayal story when the fog lifts. When all the gut feelings, the late-night doubts, the subtle shifts in behavior coalesce into something undeniable. For me, that moment came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't planned. Not really. Kat had told me she was going to the office. "Big meeting," she said, distractedly, slipping on her heels. She kissed me goodbye, a quick, practiced motion, and left without looking back. For reasons I couldn't quite explain, I didn't go straight to my home office after she left. Instead, I stood at the window watching her car pull out of the driveway. Something about the way she checked her phone as she drove away, it hit me. A sudden, overwhelming certainty. I couldn't shake it anymore. On autopilot, I grabbed my keys and followed. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Paranoid. Maybe I was just going to get coffee. Maybe I just happened to be heading in the same direction. But every red light, every turn she made, I followed. She didn't head toward her office. No, she drove right past it. Instead, she pulled into a small wine bar tucked away on a quieter street downtown. A place I knew well. We'd gone there once for our anniversary. The kind of **mate spot where every table has a candle, the lights are low, and conversations are meant to be private. My pulse spiked. I parked 2 blocks away. Gave myself a moment. Tried to breathe. Maybe it was a client meeting. Maybe it was work-related. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. I approached the bar carefully, staying outside at first. Through the large glass windows, I spotted her immediately. Kat, sitting at a corner table. And across from her, Jake. Of course it was Jake. They were sitting close. Closer than necessary. His hand rested casually on the back of her chair, fingers just grazing her shoulder. She laughed at something he said, her face lit up in a way that made my chest ache. I stood there frozen, watching. It wasn't the laughter that hurt, or even the proximity. It was the familiarity, the ease between them. The way she tilted her head slightly toward him like she was drawn in by a magnetic pull. That wasn't how colleagues acted. And suddenly all those little things, the late nights, the new perfume, the guarded phone, snapped into place. This was it. The definitive proof. They hadn't noticed me. I could have walked in, confronted them right there. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid of conflict, but because in that moment I realized something else. I didn't need a scene. I didn't need excuses. I already had my answer. I turned and walked away, my footsteps heavy, the city noise muffled under the weight of my thoughts. The cold wind cut through my jacket, but it barely registered. All I could think about was the two of them sitting in that dimly lit bar, carving out a world that no longer included me. On the drive home, I felt numb. Not angry. Not even sad. Just hollow. It's funny how the mind works. You imagine that catching someone in the act would be this explosive, life-altering moment. But in reality, it was quiet. Almost clinical. Like watching a stranger perform surgery on your heart except you're wide awake and there's nothing you can do about it. When I got home, the house felt unfamiliar. The same walls, same furniture, but it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It was just a backdrop to a life that had quietly unraveled while I wasn't looking. Kat came home later that evening, right on schedule. "Hey, babe," she greeted me as if nothing had changed. She set her bag down, kicked off her shoes, and joined me on the couch. She started talking about her day, about meetings and projects, weaving a story I no longer believed. I watched her closely. Every word, every gesture. She was good at this. At pretending. But not good enough. I didn't confront her that night. I let her talk. Let her spin her version of reality. Because part of me needed time. Time to process, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. After she went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, staring at my reflection in the black screen of the TV. The man staring back looked tired. Older. Not because of the years, but because of the weight of betrayal. There's an emptiness that comes with knowing the person you love has chosen someone else. Not necessarily in words, but in attention, in affection, in secrets. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, feeling the slow, suffocating realization that my marriage was no longer what I thought it was. The next morning, she acted like everything was fine. Made coffee. Scrolled through her phone. Told me about an upcoming team offsite, using words like synergy and collaboration that made my skin crawl. I nodded. Smiled. Inside, I was already gone. I started noticing more things after that. How she'd text someone under the table, her face lighting up when she thought I wasn't looking. How Jake's name came up more often, slipped casually into conversation. How she'd vanish into another room to take calls, always claiming it was work-related. But I didn't need more proof. I already had it. What I needed was a plan. Not revenge. Not theatrics. Just clarity. That evening, I dug through old photos. Our wedding album. Vacations. Random selfies from lazy Sundays. For a moment, I wondered how we'd gotten here. How two people who once couldn't stop touching each other had become strangers under the same roof. Was it gradual? Or had I just been too blind to see it? Maybe a bit of both. I wasn't blameless. Somewhere along the line, I'd let routine take over. Work, errands, the daily grind. Maybe I'd taken her for granted. Maybe she'd felt unseen. But nothing justified betrayal. You don't fall into someone else's arms by accident. The next morning, I made a decision. No more pretending. But I wasn't going to confront her without a clear head. I owed it to myself to approach this with dignity. So I waited. Watched. Listened. And quietly, I started preparing for the inevitable. Not with rage. Not with desperation. But with resolve. The proof was in front of me. I just needed to decide what came next. After seeing Kat with Jake at that wine bar, something shifted inside me. Not in an explosive, dramatic way, no shouting matches, no throwing things. No storming out into the night. It was quieter than that. More surgical. Like a clean, precise cut. I think that's what surprised me the most. I always imagined betrayal would feel like getting hit by a truck. Sudden. Violent. But instead, it was more like a slow leak. A gradual draining of trust until, finally, you're left empty. That night when Kat came home, she didn't know I'd seen her. She acted normal. Asked about my day. Told me hers, told me the version of her day she wanted me to believe. It wasn't the words that bothered me. It was the ease with which she lied. I used to admire how smooth Kat was with people. How she could navigate awkward conversations with grace, always knowing what to say. Turns out that SK*LL was being used on me now. Funny how that works. We sat on the couch together, the TV flickering in the background, some mindless show we weren't really watching. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment it almost felt normal. Almost. But all I could see was her sitting with Jake, their heads close, his hand on her back, her laughter not quite reaching her eyes when she was with me. In that moment, I realized something I'd been avoiding. We were done. Not officially. Not publicly. But emotionally, we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. I don't know when it happened. Maybe months ago. Maybe that very night. But the version of us I believed in? It was gone. The worst part was I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger would have been easier. Cleaner. But what I felt was heavier. A kind of sadness that settled into my bones. The kind that makes you question everything you thought was solid. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched. Observed. Let her words wash over me without really absorbing them. It wasn't about catching her in a lie anymore. I'd already done that. This was about acceptance. About acknowledging that the person I loved had become a stranger right in front of me. Over the next few days, Kat tried harder than usual. She suggested date nights, asked about my projects at work, even made my favorite dinner, lasagna, the one with the extra garlic bread. To anyone else, it would have looked like she was being the perfect wife. But I knew better. It wasn't genuine. It was a performance. Damage control. I found myself dissecting her every move. Analyzing her smiles, her touches, the way she'd glance at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She was trying to patch holes in a ship that had already sunk. And me? I was tired of pretending to bail water. One evening, I came home to find her scrolling through old photos on her phone. She smiled when she saw me. "Remember this?" she asked, showing me a picture from our trip to the coast 2 years ago. We looked happy. Sun-kissed. Carefree. I nodded. Yeah. Good times? But the weight of what wasn't being said filled the room. I think she felt it too. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, she hesitated at the doorway. I was brushing my teeth, trying to avoid meeting her eyes in the mirror. She said quietly, "Are we okay?" It was a simple question. And for a split second, I wanted to lie. To say yes. To preserve the illusion. But I couldn't. "We're fine," I said, but my voice betrayed me. She didn't push. Just gave me a small nod and crawled into bed. The silence between us said more than any argument could. That's the thing about relationships, they don't always end with a bang. Sometimes they dissolve in slow motion. Little fractures, tiny betrayals, until you're left with a hollow shell of what you once had. I started sleeping on the couch more often. At first, it was falling asleep watching TV. Then it became a habit. A quiet retreat. She noticed. Of course she did. But she didn't ask why. Neither of us wanted to be the one to say it out loud. I kept remembering things. Random memories. Our first apartment, cramped and too expensive, where we'd laugh about our lack of furniture. The way she used to trace circles on my chest while we talked late into the night. The way her eyes used to light up when I walked into a room. That woman was gone. Replaced by someone who flinched when her phone buzzed. I wondered if she felt the same about me. Did she look at me and see the man she married? Or was I just a placeholder now? A relic from a life she was quietly stepping away from? The weight of that thought was suffocating. One afternoon, while she was working late again, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop but not really seeing it. My mind kept replaying the image of her with Jake. The casual in * Macy. The ease. The way she smiled at him. It wasn't anger I felt. It was grief. Grief for the version of us that no longer existed. I realized then that I'd been mourning our marriage for a while now. Even before the wine bar. The signs had been there. I just didn't want to see them. I think part of me believed that if I ignored it, if I pretended hard enough, we could fix it. Go back to the way things were. But you can't rebuild something when the foundation's rotted through. That evening, when Kat came home, she found me sitting in the living room with the lights off. The TV was on, but I wasn't watching. She hesitated at the doorway. "Long day?" she asked, voice light, casual. "Yeah," I replied, matching her tone. She stood there for a moment, like she wanted to say more. Then she sighed and went upstairs. And just like that, another crack in the wall. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't going to be a dramatic showdown. No ultimatums. No, how could you, speeches. Just clarity. I couldn't keep pretending. Couldn't keep living in a house filled with ghosts of what we used to be. That night, lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, I made a quiet decision. I wasn't angry. I wasn't going to fight. I was just done. Done with the lies. Done with the pretending. Done trying to hold together something that had already fallen apart. It wasn't an easy decision. Ending a marriage never is. But it was the only choice left. Kat would keep playing her role for as long as I let her. But I couldn't be part of that charade anymore. The heavy realization settled over me, not like a crushing weight, but like a quiet acceptance. It was over. We just hadn't said it yet. But we would. Soon. After weeks of pretending, there's a numbness that sets in. A kind of autopilot mode where you go through the motions, wake up, work, smile when spoken to, but inside, you're just not there. That's where I was. Kat kept up appearances. She still made coffee in the mornings, still asked about my day, still acted like we were fine. But everything about her felt rehearsed. Like she was reading from a script titled How to Be a Good Wife When You're Not. And I kept playing my role too. The reliable husband. Steady. Predictable. But inside, the gap between us was a chasm, growing wider by the day. The real breaking point came with the cabin trip. It was her idea. "We should get away for a weekend," she said one evening, as if she hadn't been slowly detaching from me for months. Unplug. Just us. Like old times? The words hung in the air, thick with irony. Old times? Back when we were still us. I knew what she was trying to do. It wasn't about fixing things. It was about patching cracks with duct tape. A temporary distraction. But I agreed. Not because I thought it would help. Because I needed the clarity that would come with the quiet. The drive up to the cabin was surreal. 2 hours of winding roads surrounded by trees that were shedding their leaves faster than we were shedding our pretense. Kat talked more during the drive than she had in weeks. Small talk, mostly. Updates about work, vague stories that conveniently excluded Jake. I nodded along, letting her fill the silence. But the weight between us was palpable. When we arrived, the cabin looked exactly the same as the last time we were there. Same worn wooden porch. Same creaky steps. But it felt different. Like a museum exhibit of a life that no longer existed. Inside, she unpacked like it was a vacation. Set out snacks, lit a fire, even put on one of those instrumental playlists she used to love. It should have felt comforting. It didn't. That evening, we sat on the old couch, a blanket draped over our laps, watching a movie we'd seen a dozen times. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, but it felt off. Like she was trying to recreate an old photograph, forcing it into focus. When the credits rolled, she turned to me. "I miss this," she said softly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, I almost believed it. Almost. But then I remembered the wine bar. Jake's hand on her back. Her laughter, softer, warmer, reserved for someone else. "You miss the idea of this," I said quietly. She flinched. A small thing, barely noticeable. But it was the first crack in her facade. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her tone defensive. "It means you miss how things used to feel. But you don't miss me." "Not really." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I countered, keeping my voice level. "Tell me, Kat, when was the last time you actually wanted to be with me, not just the version of me that fits into your Instagram feed?" Silence. She looked away, focusing on the fire crackling in the hearth. "This isn't how I wanted this to go," she said after a long pause. I almost laughed. Neither did I. The conversation ended there. Not with closure. Just exhaustion. The next morning, she was back to playing house. Making breakfast, humming softly, pretending we hadn't cracked open the truth the night before. I watched her move around the kitchen, going through the motions, and realized we were past the point of no return. That afternoon, we went for a walk by the lake. The sky was overcast, the water still, reflecting a dull, gray version of the world. Fitting. Kat reached for my hand, fingers threading through mine like muscle memory. I let her. For a moment, it was almost easy to pretend. But the weight of what we weren't saying was suffocating. "Do you ever think about when we first met?" she asked, eyes on the water. "All the time," I replied. "Especially lately." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We used to be good, didn't we?" "Yeah," I said. "We did. And that was the crux of it. We used to be good." Past tense. On the last night at the cabin, we sat outside on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the cold seeping into our bones. The silence between us wasn't comfortable anymore. It was heavy. Pressurized. "I don't know how we got here," she said eventually, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do," I replied. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment, her mask slipped. "I'm sorry, Ree," she said, her voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you." But she already had. The thing about apologies is they don't undo choices. They don't erase nights spent in the company of someone else while your partner lies awake, wondering what went wrong. "I know," I said. But wanting not to hurt someone and not hurting them are two different things. The next morning, we packed in silence. On the drive back, she reached for the radio, filling the car with music as if that would drown out the truth. It didn't. When we got home, the house felt different. Not emptier. Just done. Kat unpacked, moved through the house like normal, but I could see it on her face. She knew. We both knew. That night, we went through the motions. Dinner. Dishes. Small talk. But we weren't fooling anyone. Later, as I lay on the couch, my new normal, I stared at the ceiling, realizing this wasn't just a rough patch. This wasn't something therapy or a weekend getaway could fix. We were past fixing. The breaking point wasn't some dramatic fight. It wasn't catching her in bed with Jake. It wasn't a single, defining moment. It was the slow, undeniable realization that the person you love has already left. Emotionally. Mentally. You're just the last to get the memo. That's what this was. A quiet ending. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready.